So it's early June, and this is our food forest after around 3 to 4 years of growth. This area here to the right of the camera, you can see a lot of the clover that we just planted. So a couple months ago, our neighbor cut down some of the arbor vitae that were on our border, and they put up this green fence. And we ended up clearing some of the old yew trees that used to be there. And we planted some comfrey, some raspberries, and my mom seeded out some clover seed, and you can see how well it was doing on the bare soil that was left after that. So this area is relatively fresh. We can see that some of the comfrey is already starting to flower. Some of the smaller root segments aren't flowering yet, but you can see it's already active with bumblebees and that sort of thing. And some of the raspberries that we moved, these root crowns, only been in the ground for around a month and a half, and they're doing quite well right here. So we're expecting them to fill out more. You can see the mix of nitrogen fixers and dynamic accumulators that we've put here before we're planting a lot of the larger fruit trees that we're deciding on. We haven't really decided what we're going to put here next, but we're already preparing the ground to make sure that it's going to do well, just like this other area over here. So you can see this area has a bit more plants than the last area, and this has been going on for around 3 years now. So these peach and nectarine trees over here have been in the ground for almost 3 years, and you can see that we're getting some fruit set on these. We have a couple here. But really the main fruit set that we have is on the peach tree over in the other corner over there. And you can see that I actually thinned some of the peaches this year. Most of the time animals like the chipmunks get most of them. But I took off some this year because there's just so many. And that tree's only been in the ground for about another year on top of what these two were. And they're doing quite well. Less disease pressure this year from what I can see, but it's still early in the season, so we don't know what will happen there. And these are some currants. You can see they're under this elderberry that's doing quite well. It's not quite flowering, but it's about to start doing that. And these currants have been in the ground for around 3 years, and we can see they're already starting to get a good amount of fruit. Really excited. You know, they're not ripe yet, but these are red currants, and there's going to be a good amount of fruit this year, even more than last year. And again, these take a couple years to get going. Last year we had probably significantly less fruit, and the year before that we had basically none. So I'm pretty excited. We have another batch over to the left, which is similar in that there's a good amount of fruit set, and it seems like it's not too far along from when it will be edible. So this is our other currant bush. It's not quite as big as the other one, but you can see again it's fruiting. Some things are taking a couple of the berries here, but we're happy to leave some of them. And it seems to be doing quite well. We planted out a lot of nitrogen fixers and other support species. We have a large senna that is starting to come up in the background there. And originally this all had a cover crop of clover a couple years ago before other crops started to really get going in here. Now we can see a lot of things like milkweed and some of the Jerusalem artichokes that we planted and comfrey. But those all sort of grew after the clover. Just like we used the clover over in the first area, it really is a starter species, because once it gets in there for a year or so, after 2 years, it starts to fade a little bit as other things start coming in, and then eventually it gets entirely replaced. So this all used to be a bright green clover patch, but now it's just filled with a lot of other more complex species. Now this is the oldest peach tree that we have on the property. This is almost 4 years in the ground, and when we planted it, it was probably a couple years old from the nursery. And it's well above my head. It's probably 15 feet tall at least by now. And the crop set on this is even better than the other ones. It just really started to take off this year. Again, every branch just has a bunch of these peaches. And less disease pressure on the new growth this year than I've noticed in the past years. Usually we get some sort of fungal disease, I'm not sure what, but a lot of the growth this year is green and without any real visible issues, which is a great thing because for the past several years, we've had a lot of disease issues with these, and it seems like they're more in the clear now. And something that I've noticed with these peach trees is that the wood, especially on a thicker stem like this, is very responsive to touch. You can really squeeze it and feel a little bit of give because of all the, I guess the sap or the xylem, whatever's running through this tree. You can squeeze it and feel it give way to your fingers a little bit. And I've not noticed that with most other trees, especially trees of this diameter that I've run across. And so it's very interesting. A good healthy peach tree, you can press in almost and get a little bit of a response. And this is a guild that is a couple years old, and it's a classic fruit tree, tap-rooted nitrogen accumulator, and flowering species mix, where we have Jerusalem artichokes to the left, they're just starting to emerge, comfrey, and then this nice cold hardy peach. And I did some pruning earlier this year, and it really is focusing a lot more energy into the fruits, which is really exciting. I'll have to do a bit more thinning than I did already, because you can see the set is just fantastic. And so we'll have to thin that out just so they don't all get really small. But again, usually a lot of the small creatures will take a lot of these fruits, so I'm not too worried about there being too many. And these are some of the raspberries. These are everbearing, so they have 2 crops a year, which is really nice. This part was planted around 2.5 years ago, and you can see that already they are probably close to 6 feet tall, and just growing voraciously. We end up mowing them back on the border here to keep them in check, and really excited for this crop this year. Some of the flowers have already started. You can see some berries starting to form there, and a lot of the other flower buds are still closed. So really, once it gets going, it'll flower for a large portion of the year, and provide a lot of nectar and food, which is great. And it loves this area. This is a very high sunlight area, and near the peach trees and the other guilds that we have that are supported by the other nitrogen fixer and dynamic accumulator species. So around 3 years ago, almost all of this area was just mowed grass. And the grass wasn't super successful throughout large portions of this area because it was very dry. And you can see along the pathways, there's a lot of anthills. They've really moved into the pathways as opposed to the garden beds as the roots of the plants start to take up a lot more mass. And so they find it probably a bit easier to dig around in the walkway area because we don't have as much complex growth vertically into the soil. But earlier, you know, a lot of this area was just anthills and dry dirt and failed grass. And you can see after 3 years, we have just an explosion of plant life. We have the garden beds lined with comfrey planted at different points. I think this plant's a little bit younger than the one right behind it. And, you know, things like garlic, making a nice rhizome barrier between the grass and the more fungally dominated soil. So this is our most prolifically fruiting blueberry bush. And this one's been in the ground for probably closer to a decade, if not, 7-8 years. This we planted a while ago when we took down some other trees that were sort of in this sloped area. And it is just now really starting to put on some fruit. We are only seeing at least a relatively good fruit set from blueberries that have been in the ground for at least 5 years. Some of the other ones that we planted, 3 years ago, even they're not doing nearly as well. In fact, most of them don't have any fruit at all at this point. So this one's doing pretty well, along with a couple of other ones that we planted a couple years after. So been in the ground probably 5 to 6 years. Those at least have some fruit set, and these are all in at least partially shaded locations. I mean, there's a full tree canopy overhead, and we've had to cut back some branches from this ornamental tree. I think it's a Japanese It's a Japanese something. I'll put the name on the screen. But it's not a native plant. We've slowly begun to phase it out just to establish more native and fruiting plants around it. And the blueberries responded pretty well to some of the sunlight. You can see it's leaning pretty far heavily, but some of the new growth isn't leaning quite as far because we've clipped back some of that canopy. That's something that I'll actually need to do while I'm still here. So after a couple years in the ground, there are a couple herbaceous plants that are really some of my favorites for this zone and this area. And you can see one of them, the spikenard, the American spikenard, is already, 2.5 feet tall. And this has just completely jumped out of the ground in the past month and a half. The last time I was here in late April, it really was nothing more than just starting to peek over the ground. And already it's just doing phenomenal. This has been here for 2.5, 3 years. And it's just a very, very healthy plant. I'm really excited for the berries and the fruit set that this is going to have this year. Last year, it had just a phenomenal load. And I tried some. I'm not the biggest fan of the flavor, but it's neat to have, and it's such a unique fruit and just a fun form of plant. It looks great, just sort of in this corner, complementing the edge of sort of the walkway and where these garden beds begin. Now, one of the other plants that I'm just absolutely crazy about is the senna. And this was a sort of uncommon plant as well. I only discovered it at the native plant store, and it is just starting to peek above the ground. It sort of has that rubbery almost texture, really smooth to the touch, and full of liquid, full of water that you'll see in other things like the blue false indigo over there. That same type of leaf that really cannot handle any frost at all. And so, it's really late getting out of the ground, but once it's here, it'll stay until, we see some nice cold killing frosts. And I really just love the form of it. The leaves are so intricate and compound. It's very unique for some of the plants that I've seen up here. It has almost like black locust style leaves, but in a completely herbaceous plant that, again, is going to get probably at least 5 feet tall here in the shade, and it'll get closer to 8 feet tall in a full sun location like we have close to the peach trees in the other area. And we found that in sandy soils, senna is actually pretty good at distributing itself throughout the area. This plant, we didn't plant at all. It's a volunteer, and it's probably 1.5 years old. And it's, it's coming out of the ground really quickly. And it's just so exciting to see plants like these get established in other areas to just fill out the landscape with this lovely, complex, and helpful resource that's really going to just boost all of the other plants around it. You can see the blueberry right next door. That's just going to benefit from all of the nutrients that are pumped into the soil by this herbaceous nitrogen fixing legume. So that's been a good update of where we are here, going 3 to 4 years on in this food forest. Lots of berries, some fruiting trees, lots of things going on this year. So it's really, really exciting. I love this time, early spring, where things are just starting to pop, seeing all of the plants just really start to kick into gear. Seeing a lot of phenomenal growth, especially since I've been here a 1.5 months ago. So it's a really exciting time, and I'll be sure to document any more happenings that I observe and just keep you guys updated in terms of everything that's going on in this young food forest here in New England.